Something we don't talk about enough is how men suffer from patriarchy, and we're going to talk about it. So here's the thing, we always hear and we always know too well how women have suffered in the hands of patriarchy for thousands of years. We've seen it with domestic violence. We've seen it with sexual assault. We've seen it financial abuse. We've seen so many ways that women suffer in the hands of men that we neglect the way that men suffer in the hands of men. You're watching the Kenim O show, and I'm your host, Kenim O. Okay, so women, we don't talk about the fact that men suffer from men. And what does this mean? If you ask anybody and you ask who rules the world, a lot of people will tell you that men rule the world. But the truth is, that's only 1% of men that actually rule the world. So that's not really men. Most men in the world, I won't say they suffer, but they're not living. They're not in control. They're not in power. They are working those hard jobs, labor-intensive jobs. They're working hard, physical labor. So I'm going to break down 2 or 3 ways that men suffer from patriarchy, and nobody is talking about it. The first way that men suffer from patriarchy, or let's put it this way, the way that society or the 1% has gotten away gotten away with making men suffer from patriarchy is that they have lied to them. Men believe that they are superior to women. They believe that they are superior to women because they are physically stronger than women. I mean, I could go into so much depth about how physical strength does not equate to power or dominance, because at the end of the day, if we really want to get into it and we look at it from a survival of the fittest perspective, lions are stronger than men. Why aren't they at the top of the food chain? So what makes a man or a human at the top of the food chain? We're called Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens. There were other Homo species, but we are Homo sapiens. And what does Homo sapien mean? It means wise man. Intelligence is why we are at the top of the food chain. Now, as we first evolved into Homo sapiens from other Homo species, strength was important. In fact, I'll go as far to say that strength was important up until maybe recently. But right now we are in the information era. And the most intelligent in this era will succeed. So this idea that men are superior to women is a lie, right? Even when you look at the foundation of humanity, the way that we got here was not through physical strength, it was through intelligence, right? And there were people that were more intelligent than others that created a system of governance, right, that allowed them to stay at the top. And when they made this system of governance, they excluded certain people, certain groups from accessing that. They excluded women, they excluded Black people from accessing education, because giving a human being more education makes them better, gives them more access to power. And these guys at the top understood that, and they created limitations to ensure that these people stayed away from education. So I say all this to say, this idea that men are superior to women is unintelligent. Is unintelligent. It's a lie. It is a deep, deep lie that they've told themselves to make themselves feel better. But more importantly, those at the top, excluding these men at the bottom from the hierarchy, they want to give them some crumbs. So they brainwash them to believe that they're still superior to women. But when you look at the actuality of the situation, the way this world works is not based on, it is based on power, first of all. But proximity to power is what? Before anything, it is wealth. Money can buy you everything in this world, right? So wealth, gives you access. So a woman with more money is always going to live a superior life and be treated better than a man with no money. Then the next thing is race. And when you look at American history, the way that they designed racism, it was a way, it's still part of the hierarchy, right? To exclude people. So the first system is having white men at the top, but white men have to mate with white women to ensure that they continue to have white babies. So they ensured that their women were nested. They created a nest egg for their women, right? And excluded everybody else. But what you start, when you look at the history books, what you start to find out is what was happening in America is that the poor people, blacks, whites, Italians, Jews, they all started, the ones that were at the bottom, they started mingling, they started getting together, they started, having conversations, realizing, wait a minute, these rich people are treating us terribly. Oh, no. The rich white men saw this happening and they said, no. Go listen to the podcast, Seeing White, and they break this down. But they said, no. These people are not going to unite. So what are we going to do? We are going to create deeper segregation. We will segregate people by race, especially whites and blacks, to ensure that no matter what, you have more proximity to wealth when you're white. And this system has been created and perpetuated, especially in America, but we see it perpetuated in other countries. But it was created to ensure that black people were kept down and white people had more proximity to wealth, right? Because ultimately, white supremacy was built on the back of capitalism. I talk about it. I have videos, I break this down. And so capitalism is the number one thing you can have. Capital is the number one thing you can have in this world to have anything you want in the world. Yes, people might exclude you because of race, but that's due to 500 years of brainwashing. Ultimately, you will still benefit. You will still benefit from being, especially if you're outside of America. Race doesn't play a big part in a lot of places as much as it does in America. But in the American context, it does play a massive role. So let's get back to this point, right? The idea that men have been lied to. So these 1%ers, they convince these men at the bottom that they are superior to women. This was to keep these men quiet and submissive. They also ensured that these men at the bottom praised them and glorified them. Look to them. While these men at the top, the 1%, have access to all the best women, have access to all the best lifestyle, but to ensure that the men at the bottom do not attack and fight them, they convince them that they are superior to these women at the top. But when you really look at it, who has the better lifestyle? Who has the better access to education? Who has the better life? It's these women at the top. So that's the first issue in society. Men have been convinced that they are superior to women, and it's a big lie, it's a big scam, which buttered them up to be able to manipulate them. It's also a tool that's used to feed their egos and give them a sense of importance. But here's the problem. When somebody attaches capitalism with masculinity and your ability to climb the capitalistic ladder as a measure of your masculinity, and you're not able to achieve that, what then happens? You tend to overcompensate in other areas of your life where you can showcase your masculinity. And that breeds toxic masculinity. That breeds a lack of emotional intelligence. That breeds a very toxic environment and mindset. And that's why you'll find a lot of men at the bottom who don't have access to all these things, well, not only do they end up, a lot of them are committing suicide, but men at the top and bottom are committing suicide. You used to find a lot more men commit suicide because they don't have a way to express or even articulate or even navigate their emotional intelligence. They struggle with emotional intelligence, which has resulted in higher rates of suicide, higher rates of depression, etc. So what does this say? What does this tell us? That the other reason why men suffer from patriarchy is because they are brainwashed to believe that they are not a man unless insert whatever it is. And this creates a pressure to live up to being a man. But when people detach from gender roles and just accept that they are human, there's a lot less pressure. You get to define what it means to be a man. You should never let anyone determine what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be masculine, what it means to be feminine. Don't let anyone determine that for you. You must determine it for yourself. And it should not be attached to you achieving anything, because you're born a man. You're already a man. What does it take to be a man? Be born a man, right? You could also have this argument about transgender people and non-binary people. What does it take to be a man? To believe that you're a man. You could say it that way also. What does it take to be a woman? To believe that you're a woman, or to be born as a woman. That's all it takes. There is no level of you needing to achieve anything. You are enough the way that you are. And that's the unfortunate thing about a patriarchy. It teaches men that they are not enough. It emasculates them to believe that they are not enough. And guess what? Women are just as capable of perpetuating patriarchy as much as men are. Women too have been brainwashed to only want men that are masculine, quote unquote, to only seek out masculine energy, quote unquote. But this idea of masculinity and femininity is not attached to gender specifically. And I find it a little bit troublesome that the word masculine, which is supposedly attached to men, encompasses everything that has to do with what it means to be a human. Survival of the fittest. That's the number one reason why we are thriving as a human. So anyone that wants to be independent, anyone that wants to be able to provide for themselves, give themselves food, is ambitious, that is considered masculine. That's ridiculous to me. That just is human. That is human nature. Why are we at the top of the food chain? Why isn't an elephant or a lion at the top of the food chain? They're stronger. They're more masculine than any of you that you think you're masculine. I bet you a lioness is more masculine than the most masculine that you can think of. But why are they not at the top of the food chain? Why are we here? Because we are the fittest. Fitness meaning intelligent. We are the most intelligent. That's why we're here. So what does this mean? What am I saying? This idea that anyone that is ambitious, anyone that wants to be able to feed themselves, that wants to be able to survive, has to be masculine, and that's associated with masculinity, and submission and weakness is associated with femininity. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. And it's a way that men sort of not only create this idea of what masculinity should be and make any man that does not meet up to it depressed or belittle them, but they also want to exclude women from masculinity, right? From this, but I say to hell with it all. Being ambitious is not a masculine trait. It's a human trait. It's a trait of a survivor. the fittest survivor. That's it. It has nothing to do with your gender. It has nothing to do with your gender identity. It has nothing to do with that. It's what we use as humans to climb to the top of the food chain. And guess what? We would never have made it without both genders. So everybody must be included in this conversation of ambition. That is just what the fit do. It's not a masculine trait. It's not a feminine trait. It's ridiculous even having that conversation. But either way, do men suffer from patriarchy? Absolutely. Those are my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down below. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, all the above. You're watching the Kenim O Show, and my name is Kenim. See you next time.